Is it a good time to be an Airbnb investor if you're a beginner?
It is, and here's why.
What are some of the markets either still working or kind of on the up and up?
As a new investor, it's always easiest to start in what I call mega markets because the tourism is there to support it.
Oversaturation means there's more data. More data means you can actually look at your competitors, see what they're doing right, and in theory, outcompete them.
People ask me all the time, did I miss the boat on short-term rentals? Is it too late? Or has market saturation made it impossible to compete? And those are the exact questions that I'm gonna be breaking down today with my good friend Avery Carl, who I actually had on the channel last year when I ran into her at BPCon. And that video got 44,000 views. And so when I ran into Avery at this year's BPCon, I figured we're long overdue, so why not do a part two and do a breakdown of all of the things that hosts need to do to be successful going into 2025. On today's episode of Raw Bill. Why did I stand up? I don't know. On today's episode of Raw Bill. Bye. I'm still here. There's not really a place for me to run over there. All right, to the video.
Avery Carl, last year we did a video called The Harsh Reality of the Short-Term Rental Collapse. I wanted to bring you on for a follow-up because it's a year later, it's 2024, and I just want to set the record. Is it a good time to be an Airbnb investor if you're a beginner?
It is, and the reason that it's a good time is because there's a lot of opportunity in the market, and here's why. So we're coming off of the highest interest rates in the past 20 years. And because of that, there's not a lot of competition for new buyers. A lot of sellers are getting out of the game that got in 2021 that maybe shouldn't have been buying short-term rentals because they kind of weren't looking at it as the business that it is. And 2 years
They were
in,
dabbling.
Yeah, they were dabbling. We had a lot of dabblers in 2021. And a lot of people are like 2 years in, oh God, this is a business. This requires work. I have to look at this thing every day.
I have to deal with people?
Yes, dealing with
multiple
people.
years? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those people are getting out. So there's a good amount of inventory on the market, plus not a lot of other buyer competition, so you can negotiate some pretty good discounts right now. And I think that the bottom of the economy was maybe this summer, and it's starting to tick back up. The Fed just lowered rates. We know that's going to continue to happen, or we think, we don't ever know. And so I think that now is a really good opportunity to be able to pick up some properties at a good discount without a lot of competition. And then tourism dollars are starting to pick back up also. So I think that we're going to see rentals pick back up as well.
So it's a good opportunity. Is it harder than it has been over the last 5 years?
Yes, and I think the reason for that is our asset class has stabilized, which is a good thing. I think that we saw a huge, crazy run up, and a lot of people bought short-term rentals that, like I said, maybe didn't need to be. 50% of all real estate, whether short-term, long-term, or anything else, is sold within the first 2 years of investment real estate. So we saw a lot of people getting in 2021, a lot of people getting out now, and I think it's still really, really doable for newbies. I think that you just have to actually be a real estate investor now. You can't just slap things up. So what I mean by that is, in multifamily, which has been around, been an established asset class for longer, perceivedly. We've been an asset class for a lot longer than people think. But multifamily, they always have to look for something in a great location, buy something that they can add value to, and do that over time. So short-term rentals, it's no different now. You buy something in a great location. The location is something you can't change. You can't change the natural resources available. Look for places that have really, really high tourism volume and find a property where you can add value.
Okay, so I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Particularly, I do think we had this era from 2020 to 2022. The dabblers were entering. And this was basically the era of people putting mattresses in their houses,
Yes.
getting nice art from Target, IKEA, World Market, and putting together cute places. But I do feel like the dynamic has changed, and specifically around the country, I do feel like it's the amenity stuff that's working. Now, I know that you're very specialized in the Smoky Mountains. How much do amenities actually matter in a place like the Smoky Mountains, like a pickleball court, for example? I know that there's some kind of standard amenities there, but would you say that now more than ever that's important, or is the game pretty stabilized in the Smoky Mountains?
In the Smokies specifically, I think that in any market, you really just have to know your target demographic really well, understand the people who are coming there and why and what they're doing and how they spend their money. So the amenities that work, the highest value amenities, are going to be different across different markets. So like a Scottsdale pickleball court, really, really great to have. I think a pickleball court in the Smokies can add some income, but I think what people forget about the Smokies, because it gets talked about so much, is that it's a very blue collar market. So if you're starting to spend a lot of like Scottsdale money on amenities there, you can start to push your price per night up so high that you're now outside the budget of the Smoky Mountain market. So if you're able to do it cheaply, I think that, why not? But I think the cool thing about investing in short-term rentals and real estate investing in general is there's 1,000 ways to be successful. So none of my properties have any of those crazy amenities. They're cute, clean, comfortable, updated. We give really, really great service, and they're really clean. And we've got a lot of 5-star reviews. So we actually own the longest running short-term rental in the Smokies on Airbnb right now, because we've just been on there, I guess, 10 years now.
Like your specific listing that you launched 10 years ago is the longest running?
It's the longest running. Anything that was on there before us has been sold off now and has new owners. And so,
Yeah.
It had
It's
a lapse.
transitioned,
Yes,
for sure.
it's transitioned. So our thing is in that market, and then also in the other markets that we own, has just been take what the market standard is and improve on that, go 2 steps further. We don't go crazy with
Sure.
the amenities. And I know you do, and that's like the cool thing, because we're both able to be successful and we do things different ways.
So I guess that's my question, though, is like you're saying that you can't really budget out, you can't push someone's budget up if they can't afford it, right? But with a place like the Smoky Mountains, it is the #1 national park in the country in terms of traffic, 14 million people a year, maybe 13. I said 14 a couple weeks ago, and someone was like, wait, I thought it was 13. Where are you getting your data from? And I was like, okay, sorry.
Well, if you want to talk about that with them, it's actually 20 to the Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg area. There's several million that don't even enter the park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, so the actual cities itself. Okay, that's massive.
Yeah.
So that's a really big part of the population, and I think it's because it's 8 hours driving from like most of the
From everywhere.
major cities, right? So certainly within that 20 million people, there must be kind of that upper end clientele that could afford that, right? Or do you genuinely feel like the vast majority is sort of that blue collar demographic?
I mean, there's rich people that go everywhere and do everything, but the Smokies is not Aspen. So the majority of the demographic, they're doing this as regardless of what their socioeconomic status is, they're doing this as an affordable vacation. If, somebody who can afford an expensive vacation is probably going to go somewhere else when they want to do something expensive. So Smoky Mountains, super cheap vacation. Rich person who wants to spend a bunch of money might go to Aspen or Jackson
Vail
Hole
or
or somewhere
Breckenridge.
like that.
Got
But
it.
it's definitely something that is still done by wealthy people just as a quick, weekend, cheap, fun thing to do.
Cool.
So I think that there's definitely that demographic, but what I think kind of happened with the Smokies and how the whole, it's saturated thing started happening is that a lot of outside money started coming in and they saw this hole, what they perceived to be a hole in the market in terms of high occupancy luxury cabins. And that is all that got built. Everything that has been developed in the Smokies in the past 5 years are high-end, high occupancy properties. And
It did feel like that was a gap in the market for a long time. When I got there, I was like, everything looks kind of the same, older cabin, log cabin, bear themed. So it was very rare to see that. And then I started seeing some of the high end stuff come in that was high end, but it had like drywall, which I still don't really feel like hit the vibe all that much. But yeah, I mean, it seemed like that was a relatively large gap there. Was that a gap that was like overfilled?
it was definitely overfilled. So especially there was, I don't know how many thousands of cabins were developed, but tons. And they are all 5 bedrooms and up, because when you think about it, when you're developing a development, it costs the same amount to put in the roads and hook up the water and everything, whether you're doing 1 bedrooms or 10 bedrooms. So not only were they looking at, okay, what's the hole in the market? They were looking at, well, how can I make the most money? If I put a bunch of 2 bedrooms in here, I'm going to make less money.
Yeah, push up the square footage, right?
Exactly. So I think that end got overdeveloped. And anytime I've had an investor come to me and say, hey, I'm not doing as well as I thought I was going to do, can you take a look? It's almost always one of the higher occupancy properties, because I think that was an overfilled gap. But I've never had an investor with a 1 bedroom come to me and say, hey, I'm not doing as well as I thought I could. Can you help me? Actually, we met somebody here at Bigger Pockets that bought with us that's doing $125,000 on a 1 bedroom
Wow.
in the Smokies.
How much?
$125,000.
Is it like a crazy cabin?
It
Wears
is-
Valley, crazy view?
I don't know if it's in Wears Valley. It does have a nice view. It is new construction. It's more modern looking, but it's not crazy expensive.
Dang.
But it's doing a lot.
That's insane. Yeah. Okay, so let's wind it back a little bit. I mean, I think we've talked about sort of the market now, right? Like, yes, there's an opportunity. Yes, it is harder. But you can still come in. You don't have to do crazy extravagant pickleball backyards and crazy amenities in the Smokies. You can just be above average in terms of like better design, just be better than your competition and still succeed in the Smoky Mountains. What I want to talk about now is if you are that investor right now that's popping into the short-term rental side of things and they don't want to be a dabbler, they actually want to be an investor.
Okay.
What are some of the markets that in 2024 that are either still working or maybe kind of on the up and up?
On the up and up and still working. So for me, and this is going to be contrary to what a lot of the data companies will say, but
Which ones? Just kidding.
or
Can you
the,
name them by name in excruciating detail?
I'll do that. And you know the big lists that come out from the
Sure,
big
of
property
course,
management
yeah.
companies. And to me, as a new investor, it's always easiest to start in what I call a mega market. So a Smokies or a Panama City Beach or a Scottsdale, because the reason those have developed into mega markets is because the tourism is there to support it. Other investors would not be doing this there if it didn't work. And it's going to be much easier for you as a new investor to get started. You kind of can plug and play into the infrastructure there. There's going to be plenty of cleaners, plenty of vendors that you'll need who can handle things without the owner being there. So, you know, if you're at your house in Houston, you're probably, if you order furniture, they're going to want you to be there when they deliver it. But in places that I call mega markets, which actually Luke named it mega markets, have to give him credit where credit's due.
Thank you, Luke. He's sitting back there.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's back there. So those markets, the local businesses like the furniture delivery places are going to be okay with hitting that door code culture, and putting it up and leaving. So it's much easier to get started as a newbie and not have to deal with all the crap of, you know, if you're buying something in a place where there's not a lot of short-term rentals, you got to train a regular housekeeper on how to turn a short-term rental. A lot of these companies that you might be using, whether they're contractors or furniture, et cetera, might not be used to dealing with this out-of-state investor thing. And they might not be used to this out-of-state investor thing. So it's just easier to get started and less crap to deal with when you're in a new asset class anyway and you're scared to death because you just spent your life savings, to start somewhere where it's easy to just plug in.
Cool. So let's talk about a mega market or a supermarket, if
Yeah.
you will. What does that really mean?
That was Luke too.
Yeah, that was also Luke. So walk us through what that actually means, because we hear that to someone watching the podcast or listening to the podcast are probably like, okay, well, sounds cool. What is it? What is that?
What is that? So that is going to be, for me, I like to buy only in true vacation markets. So areas that have been developed specifically for vacations, areas that you've probably heard a lot about as you're Googling short-term rentals. So places like Panama City Beach or Scottsdale or the Smokies, Gulf Shores, Alabama, areas where there's a lot of short-term rentals. There's always been a lot of short-term rentals. So a lot of these markets have been only short-term rentals and very few primary homeowners since.
But really like back to the Vrbo days,
Yeah.
like before Airbnb exploded.
Yeah,
right?
like back to the 30s even in Destin, back to the 60s in the Smokies. So
We're about to be in the 30s. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
That'll make you feel old.
Yes, it will. You
Yeah.
know, the 80s are about to be 50 years ago.
I'm an 80s baby. Did you
Me
know
too.
this? Yeah, I was born
I
in
did, yeah,
December of
told me that.
89.
December of 89?
Yeah,
You're,
I got a couple days in there.
I'm definitely an 80s baby.
Nice, nice. Me too.
Yeah, 1 year older than you, actually. Yeah, so areas, we had somebody the other day who was like, I think I want to buy in Myrtle Beach. It's affordable. This fits my budget. And then they looked on Airbnb. They're like, oh my God, every single property in Myrtle Beach is an Airbnb. Well, yeah, because that's why Myrtle Beach is what it is. As a matter of fact, I read an article last night in a bed just like this, but downstairs, that
The other podcast set.
yes,
Yeah.
that Myrtle Beach actually wants to outlaw long-term rentals because they feel they're losing $7 million worth of tourism taxes.
This is crazy to
Yeah,
me.
they want to outlaw long-term rentals to make room for more short-term rentals because they're losing millions of tourism dollars.
TikTok is going to have a heyday with that
Yeah.
law. That is crazy. I've never heard of long-term rentals being outlawed.
Yeah.
What a weird, bizarro world.
Yeah.
So, okay, that makes sense. So Myrtle Beach, that is South Carolina?
Yeah, South
Yes?
Carolina.
Okay, cool. So if that actually happens, then what's the idea there? That they just want so many more short-term rentals? At that point, wouldn't that possibly like bring up the conversation of oversaturation?
Yeah, I think that a lot of supermarkets or mega markets, depending on which day you're talking to Luke, can be viewed as oversaturated. But here's kind of the way that I look at it is I like a saturated market. Saturated, I say loosely, because that means, again, there's a reason that markets end up with a lot of rentals, and that's because the tourism is there to support it. So I would rather fish in a pond of 20 million than fish in a pond of 20,000. And when it comes to saturation, when things do get saturated, because I'm by no means saying that doesn't exist, because it does, you look at bedroom counts. So when you go back to that one bedroom I was talking about, in vacation markets, not in metro markets, because then you're competing with hotel rooms, but in vacation markets like the Smokies or any of the places we've mentioned, one bedrooms always represent, almost always, less than 1% of the available rentals on the market. So
Really?
that is one,
Wow.
one size that is almost never saturated. We own several hundred doors, and we were just under contract on a studio in the Smokies because we got to buy a few cost seg things this year. And we've owned everything from studios up to 5 bedrooms, and our studios and 1 bedrooms like always crush it. Now, when the economy is really, really good, you do have a higher return on investment on the bigger, nicer, more amenitized properties, but our 1 bedrooms are really, really nice. Like, I had to stay in one last week, and it was like, I felt like I was at a spa. So the 1 bedrooms stay very consistent across all economic times. We've actually got a client who owns 60 1-bedrooms. He can buy whatever he wants. He owns in Siesta Key and in the Smokies. He has 60 1-bedroom properties. He won't buy anything else.
Even though typically on the margins are going to be a little slimmer on a 1-bedroom, right?
A little slimmer. It just kind of depends. You got to do it right. Just like anything, you
Sure.
have to buy it right.
So that is my thought about oversaturation. I'm kind of with you on that, which is like a lot of people tend to be worried about that. The problem is with oversaturation means there's more data. More data means you can actually look at your competitors, see what they're doing right, and in theory, outcompete them, right? Where I think most people find a problem is whenever they enter a saturated market or a market becomes quote unquote saturated and those hosts don't adapt quickly to what other people are doing. And my Joshua Tree tiny home is a perfect example of this. When I came into that market in 2020, built a tiny home, that first year that property did $78,000. The second year, it did $55,000. The third year, it did $35,000.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so a lot of things are the reason for that, right? COVID, revenge travel, all that good stuff. But really what happened, and it's not that it can't be saved, but what happened was some YouTuber kept talking about Joshua Tree. Everyone went there. Everyone
Who was
started.
that?
I don't remember his name, but he basically promoted it. People came in, and I actually don't. I'm part of the reason, but it just blew up on its own. But the thing is, a lot of people came in with amenities, spa-like amenities, cowboy pools, jacuzzis, and like they started adding pickleball courts. And now, if you go to Joshua Tree, it's basically just a big Instagram influencer billboard. And so my tiny house is just that. It is a tiny house. The backyard is dirt. If you look at all the different comps that came in after me, they had the privilege of examining my property and saying, hey, how can we take that blueprint? How can we use this contractor in many cases and literally replicate my designs and actually do those amenities? And they're doing fine. They're making a ton of money. There's a guy here at this conference who's absolutely killing it out there, has insane backyards, amenities. And so what I found out is it's not that Joshua Tree died. It's not that it's oversaturated. It's that the big boys and big girls came in and actually invested there and put money into the amenities. And so for me, my story is really great. And the reason, like, I make 35 grand a year on it now. I'm still profitable. Not that profitable, but profitable. And I've cashed out, got all the money out. It doesn't really matter. It's an infinite cash on cash return. So I really just like sort of observing what happened in that market. And I think a lot of people would see that and say, oh my gosh, Joshua Tree is a failure now. It's oversaturated. Don't invest there. When my thought goes to, okay, well, I pulled the first lever, which was kind of like architecture. Everyone came in and pulled the amenities lever. So if I want to succeed out there, I have to look at what everyone in that market is doing. And I have to start pulling the hot tub lever, the landscaping lever, the deck, the yoga deck lever. And if I add that stuff, then I do actually think, for a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 investment, I can shoot my revenue from $35,000 to $50,000, $60,000, or $70,000 a year. And I know that because other people are doing that. Most people aren't willing to do that because they don't want to sink more money into a failing investment. And so that's kind of my whole thought journey with oversaturated markets is they are oversaturated, but the idea is you have to be very studious of that market and see what are the amenities that are popping off.
Yeah, and you always have to keep doing the enemy method and looking at the different people around you and seeing who's doing what, so you know that you're keeping up with it. I mean, I like the way you worded it. It's the oversaturation thing can be kind of used as a crutch or an excuse for someone who's just not willing to adapt to what their market's doing now.
Most people aren't reinvesting back into their properties. That's kind of what I found across the board. Most people are very obsessed with getting into that next door, that next property, and they're not really focused on their one singular property and how to maximize it, which is why my whole last 2 years has been can I spend money on a golf course in Crystal Beach? Can I spend money on a treehouse deck in Gatlinburg? Can I spend money on a pickleball court in Scottsdale? Because I just want to see what's working and what's not. And I feel like I've done it now to the point where I kind of understand it, but I'm willing to do that, right? And I'm very privileged to get to do that and report back. And if it works, awesome, I can brag about it. If it doesn't work, everyone loves to hate on me on the internet. The engagement goes up and it goes viral anyways. But I do think that the game really is reinvesting back into your properties. And that's the kind of the thing that people ask me a lot about in the Gatlinburg market. They're like, what can I actually do in that market? We find ourselves right there now because we aren't performing as well as we were when we first launched. Again, that was 2020. Everyone was killing it back then. But are there any kind of amenities that kind of check the boxes out in a market like the Smoky Mountains?
Well, you have to have a hot tub. I almost wouldn't even count a hot tub as an amenity because it's just a necessity.
It's just part of the house.
Yeah, you got to have it.
I didn't have a hot tub at my property for a long time, and then I added one, and it definitely increased the ADR.
Yeah, you have to have a hot tub there. In terms of big, crazy amenities, so we haven't seen a lot of people do that just yet to really know. I've seen a few, I saw one that they did a whole weight room and spent what looks like a ton of money on a spa. I mean, not a spa, a sauna.
Oh, yeah.
And a big, crazy massage chair. And I'm interested to see how that works because that seems like a very, very expensive thing to add. And again, a lot of times people it's not Joshua Tree, it's not a lot of LA people coming to do yoga in the quiet. It's people, they want to come down and go to Pigeon Forge and go to Ripley's, believe it or not, and they're running around the whole time. So I don't know that people are going to spend a lot of time in a sauna and then a cold plunge and all these things.
But I'm thinking even the basic, for me, what comes to mind with the Smoky Mountains is, again, hot tub. It's kind of why even say it, but you'd be surprised at how many people still take cell phone photos. So, we should just say it. Other things that seem to check the boxes for me, and we have a property in Cobley Knob, which is, going through it right now. We had to, shut down water for 2-3 weeks, so we're canceling all those reservations. But some of the check boxes that I feel like are in the Smoky Mountains, and this probably plays with some of the other ones, but arcade room.
Yeah, gotta have it.
Movie theater room, and game room, just in general, a pool table, all that stuff. Those to me seem to be the big 3 outside of a hot tub. And then obviously there's the pool side, but I think unless you have a 5-bedroom, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. So the game rooms are a big thing, and what the game rooms have kind of evolved over the years. So when we first started, it was pool table, only pool table. And then as time has gone on, you got to have a couple stand-up arcade games or maybe one of those sit-down Pac-Mans, and you have a whole room that's kind of dedicated to this. It's not just, throwing a pool table in the corner. And it's more about having the arcade games. So that always is a good thing to add. Movie rooms are a big one, have always been a big one. The indoor pool thing is new as of 2020 really. And those do perform really, really well, but they do have a lot of maintenance to keep up with because you have a pool with moisture inside a wood house. So, you're gonna deal with mold, you're gonna deal with humidity problems. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on if you're buying a pool cabin that isn't brand new construction because you never know how someone has maintained it. But those do add quite a bit of income.
So let me ask you this, because we've got a 4-bedroom. Okay, so we have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Cobley Knob, which is in the Smoky Mountains. And we had a den that was completely open that we converted into a bedroom. So it's effectively like a 4-2. Now, it's an open space. People can walk down the stairs they have to walk through the room to get to the other rooms. No one has really ever complained about this, but revenue has dipped. So what is your opinion on just scrapping the den as a bedroom and going back to truly a den and maybe converting that into something like a movie theater room, movie room, or a mini arcade? Where we drop a bedroom, so we lose beds and heads, but we're gaining a huge amenity that might draw. Do you think that we would be more competitive as a 3-2 with amenities than a 4-2 with none?
Ooh, that's such a hard question because it's so subjective. But if you're seeing that it's dipped, it might be worth trying. We have one client who we actually did a special on him on my YouTube, where he bought a bunch of teeny tiny cabins that are just one bedrooms or like one bedroom with an extra little loft, and he put just the smallest movie rooms up there. Like most people would have done a game room instead. It's got a screen, it's got a popcorn bar, and like bean bags that you sit on. And he said those things, that just movie room that he added with the popcorn bar has gone up I think he said $20,000 a year on each little property.
Wow,
by
okay.
having that. So I think maybe having that element of a themed space, whether it's movies or whether it's like a really cool game room, might be helpful.
Okay, that's a good idea. I mean, that's kind of what we were thinking. We were thinking either arcade or not, but the thing is, because that den is kind of open, we were thinking we could like line all the walls with like velvet curtains and just close it off. It's really not that big. I mean, it's, probably 10 by 10, right? Just like a typical size. And we feel like we can wall it off, build like a little platform where you put those Costco like movie style chairs, and then just like a relatively large projector or like big screen TV. And we do feel like, just at this point, we're just like, well, I don't think design, unless we just scrap everything, is going to be what sets us apart. And then we're kind of like on a sloped piece of land, so there's not really an amenity that we can add. We don't really have a view. But I know that people in Cobbly Knob do well, and we've done well in the past. So I'm just like, all right, there's got to be something there. So I feel like, a movie theater room could work.
Yeah, I think so.
So take us back to what you said earlier. I don't want to gloss over this. You mentioned the enemy method, which, as I know it, is your method for comping. Tell us a little bit about how that works and what people would need to do to be able to kind of use that method.
Okay, so we kind of developed that. Luke named that again. He's the name guy, and he's not listening. So anyway, Luke's the name guy. So he named it the enemy method. But when we first started buying, we had to go uphill in the snow both ways. There was no data. We started the year AirDNA came out, or maybe the year before. So there was no cool website to go type in an address and see what everybody else is doing. So all we had to go on was looking at other listings in the market to see what they were doing, what their calendars looked like, what the properties themselves looked like, and figure out how we could be better than them. So at its simplest, the enemy method is just running a competitor analysis and seeing what you can do to make a guest choose you instead of them. So really, you have to do it on the platforms. Don't do it through like the AirDNA interface, because it's different. You want to look at it through the lens of a guest. So go on Airbnb, Vrbo, look at the competition in your market for the number of bedrooms or however many you're sleeping, and see what people are doing, and see, well, can you improve on their photos? Does everybody have iPhone photos? Which back when we started, everybody had iPhone photos. It was not hard at all to be better. But the things that we looked for was like, okay, nobody has drywall. Everything's a true cabin. So we need a true cabin. This is what we need to buy. And really, we just bought the biggest thing we could afford, which was $165,000. So we couldn't afford much. And really, all it is, enemy method, you're just looking at your neighbors or your enemies, because that's more fun to say than the neighbor method.
Sure.
And seeing what they're doing and how you can be better than them.
Okay, nice. And then is there a kind of an aspect of this to where you're looking at their calendars and how booked they are?
Yes, so you do want to look at their calendars. It can be difficult during the off season to really gauge much from calendars, because a lot of times nobody's really booked in the off season. But you can see, especially if you just look a month out and see how booked they are, at what prices they're booked, and really looking to see if they're using dynamic pricing. Because if they're not, if they have the same price today, tomorrow, and 2 months from now, then they're not using dynamic pricing. And if they're not using dynamic pricing like Price Labs, they're probably not doing a lot of other management stuff well either. So that's kind of like my kind of thing that I look at the most is, okay, if they're not using dynamic pricing, I can pretty much infer that they're not managing other things as efficiently as possible. So I like to look at that too. But you want to look at the price per night that they're getting and compare to your property. What can you do to be better? Are there things you can't beat? Like, do they have a view and you don't have a view? Well, then you're going to have to compete on price is what you're going to have to do. So.
Very cool. Yeah. So do you use any of the data platforms these days?
You want to use as many as you can. There's not one specific one that I like love or hate. I just kind of look at everything, kind of get a good gauge of like a range, and then look at the enemy method. And I'm not super technical about it these days, to be honest. So look at everything a little bit loosely, and then we choose based on what we think we can do with the property.
Yeah, I'm pretty much an AirDNA guy, not because the other ones are bad or anything. It's just the AirDNA, it's like the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Right.
And I think there's a lot that is not broken, but there's a lot that's incorrect. It's funny. I've made a video on how to use AirDNA and actually looking at comps correctly. And there's like 4 things that every comp really needs. It needs to be listed on Airbnb, not just Vrbo. When it's listed on Vrbo only, we find that data is kind of wonky. We want the days available to be 250 or more. And then we also want to make sure that it has 20 or more reviews. And then we want the review population to be pretty recent, meaning when you go and look at the reviews, they're all within the last month, 2 months, 3 months, and there's no 1-year gaps. And I think that this process is very important because you have to really like pick through all the bad data, take them aside, and actually examine true comps that actually run as a full-time Airbnb. And it's a bit tedious sometimes.
Yeah,
and
it is.
it's kind of funny because I made a video that was like showing this process, and I was like, oh, yep, this comp's not good. Oh, yep, this comp's not good, and just showing the process. And then like 2 YouTubers made a video that was like, see, one of the other YouTubers, like, he's trying to use AirDNA and it's so inaccurate and his process is so dumb and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, well, that was the point. Like, the point is you got to take out the bad data, and there really is no way around it. Like, if you look at bad data to make your decisions, which I would say like a really big example of this is using the Rentalizer.
Yes.
You put in an address, it aggregates all the averages, and it gives you some random number. I bought many properties off the Rentalizer that did not pan out. We made them work, and it's fine. They're profitable for the most part, like some of those. But out of like 40, 45 doors, there's definitely some dogs in there that, I wish I could go back and change. But I think data is so important. And it seems to me that AirDNA is the closest. But I don't have a close relationship with any of the other ones yet. So I want to dive into now kind of my process for picking markets. It seems like we're not super far off, but I'm just curious on your insight into sort of my 4 categories. So category 1, national parks. I call these Mother Nature's Disney World. Number 2, state parks, Mother Nature's Disneyland, as it were. Number 3 would be vacation destinations, so beach towns, ski towns, mountain towns, lake towns, and tourist destinations like Disney, like Anaheim or Orlando, Kissimmee, whatever. And then the 4th one would be eclectic towns or like pit stop cities, like Waco in between Austin and Dallas, or Fredericksburg outside of Austin. Do you feel like those 4 categories sort of encapsulate your criteria for buying a market, or do you have something kind of like a different set of categories that you're looking at?
Slightly different, but pretty close. So I like regional drivable vacation markets, which can be a national park or a beach or a mountain. I want there to be some kind of natural resource, water, sand, snow. And but I like to choose something that I know. So, if national parks is something that I'm looking for, I'm probably never going to buy something in Joshua Tree because I've never been there. I know nothing about it. I don't know who goes there. It's not that I can't learn it, but I just personally think it's really important to really truly know or be familiar with a market that you're going to buy in. So I have not yet, I'm sure I will at some point or could, bought in a market that I didn't vacation to when I was a kid. So I think that's where a lot of investors have gotten tripped up, with all the lists that we talked about earlier over the past few years, is just buying in some random market because some random list said to, and they don't understand who goes there and why and what time of year, and really truly understand what their demographic is, what the seasonality is, and what they can expect. And so they fail. So for me, if there's not a market that works, like maybe you want to invest in Joshua Tree, you want to invest in a national park, but that one doesn't work for whatever reason, pivot to a market that's similar to the one that that it would be the same type of tourism, but in a market that does work.
Yeah, totally. I've got 3, so the 4 that I just said are my tangible categories. I've got 4 intangible categories. I can't remember the 4th one, but the 3 the 3 that come to mind are in your backyard, meaning 1 to 2.5 hours away from where you live, meaning you can get there, you can hop in a car if you need to. And it's really, these are more like things to help you mentally, because I don't think it really matters at the end of the day if you build out teams. But 1 will be in your backyard. 2 would be familiarity, meaning how familiar are you with the actual metropolitan area. So for me, I went to school at UT, the #1 public school in the country, and
Me too.
so did you.
Yes.
In Austin, Texas. I know the lay of the land very well there. I know the pockets, the neighborhoods, all that good stuff. So I'm familiar with that, and that to me is a mental block where I'm like, okay, I know the market, I can invest there, and at least I kind of am familiar with what parts are appreciating. And then 3 would be boots on the ground. are there any cities in which I know someone that can assist me if shit hits the fan? Do I have an uncle that's a contractor? Do I have like a buddy, an old, best friend that is a handyman? Whatever it is, someone that can help me run it from afar if I really need to. Again, ideally you're building that team out anyways, but I do feel like those intangible things help people just land on a market, because at the end of the day, I kind of feel like any market works, truthfully.
It can. I agree with that 100%.
But, there's some things you have to do, right? You have to pull the correct levers for that market. Okay, so let's jump into the final piece of advice here. Someone that wants to get in right now, what's your advice for someone to pick a market? How should they take an action step towards actually beating that analysis paralysis and actually finding a market that they'd want to make an offer on?
Okay, so I'd start with something that maybe. So for example, this is an example I've been using lately. So I grew up in Starkville, Mississippi. It's an SEC football town. That's all that's there is one SEC school, Mississippi State University. And so if you want to invest in Starkville, Mississippi, and you grew up there, you know everything about it, so you've got the boots on the ground, you got the connections, you know who comes there and why, great, go for it. But let's say I got down the road on it, oh crap, they don't allow short-term rentals. They do, but this is just for hypothetical purposes. Then I would pivot to something also familiar, but not that. So hour and a half down the road, we've got Tuscaloosa, where University of Alabama is. Hour and a half down the other road, we've got University of Mississippi. Same exact type of market, same exact type of tourism coming in, but maybe that works a little better. Maybe they're a little cheaper. Maybe they have better regulation. But I personally, I like game day markets like that. I do. But for me, I would say start with somewhere that you grew up going on vacation, or maybe you went once with your parents, where you stayed in a condo or a cabin or a beach house or something other than a hotel, and start there.
That's number 4. That's the fourth intangible. Places you like to vacation. Because the whole idea with Airbnb is you buy a house, someone else pays for it, you get to use it, right?
Yeah, right.
That's the whole dream. Big fan of game day markets. So I've got a property, I'll tell you, in Bryan, Texas, College Station. And people are always like, why?
Trader.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, I love taking money from Aggies. It's awesome. And we had a property there that wasn't doing so hot. I mean, it was fine, barely profitable, but we had an investor on it, and I was just like, okay, there's got to be a way we can fix this. Well, we changed the whole backyard, added a game day mural. We converted the shed into this open space at the pool table, another game day mural, big screen TV to watch football games. We added a pickleball court. We had a hot tub or a cowboy pool. It just completely transformed it. Oh, and then we added a fire pit and Adirondack chairs. So we've so far this year, and we're not even through the year, have increased revenue, AKA profit for us, $10,000. So by the end of the year, I think that will increase profit another $10,000, so $20K, meaning we will have tripled our profit for the most part. And then next year, I think we'll probably add another $30,000, maybe $40,000 to the profitability of that property. And the total investment in that backyard was $36,000. Oh, wow. So, a 50% ROI on that on the low end, and then it could be higher. But that to me is just also a really important way to look at this, because I still feel like when people buy that first property, they're just so focused on all right, well, now I got to save up $150K for the second property. And it's well, I still think the hardest place to be as a short-term rental investor is you buy your first property, you have $30K, and now you're now what? Do I have to go raise money? Do I have to go partner up with someone? And I'm no, just use the $30K to amp up your property. And that worked for us. Now I'm very on the game day properties. And so I think you'll start seeing those pop up in my portfolio as well. So if you ever want to do one, let me know.
Yeah, there is actually, about to post on my YouTube, a luxury game day Airbnb development in Starkville, Mississippi. A town of 20,000 in North Mississippi. Stuff like that is popping up. And I think the competition there, you're typically not dealing with professionals. Mm-mm. It's just people who are alumni who want to have that, and then they slap it up on Airbnb when they're not using it, if that.
Dude, it's crazy. Our mortgage on that property is $1,500, and we're having some football weekends and stuff that are $2,500, $3,000 nights, or not nights, but weekends. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of nuts that you can double your mortgage in one property, all from being themed. So, okay, yeah, send me that. I want to see it. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Listen, we talked a lot about markets in today's episode, and I have a whole system where I break down those 4 market categories that I talked about on the channel. If you want to see that video, click right here. We break it down in excruciating detail. Point to the video. Yeah. Like and subscribe too. Don't forget to do that.